What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast presented by the Chargers Podcast Network. My name is Steven, and I am the host as always, and joining me is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing today?
Doing well and staying hydrated.
Yeah, staying hydrated for sure. Welcome back, Mr. Denzel Perryman. Should be a lot of fun to see the reunion. The prank call video saying to Derwin that he was going to take number 3 was a nice touch today. So got a lot to talk about today. Of course, it is that time of the month. We are going to be joined by Mr. Trevor Sikkema to dive into everything draft related, from the Keenan Allen trade as well as the Minnesota Vikings trade that happened last weekend, and some of the other free agency tidbits that the Chargers have been able to do, how the draft ramifications stack up from signing Bradley Bozeman and things like that. So should be a lot of fun. After that interview, we'll jump back on here and we're going to talk some Keenan Allen legacy. So we wanted to make sure we honored him as in the way that he deserves. So going to have some great conversations with Trevor. Then we'll have some good conversation about Keenan Allen on the other side. Before we get started, as always, Tyler and I are fans of the team just like you guys are. The opinions that we share on this channel every single week are just that. They are our opinions, and we're very grateful to have this platform with the Chargers, and excited to dive into today's show. That being said, here is Mr. Trevor Sikkema. All right, guys, very happy now to be joined by Mr. Trevor Sikkema. You've heard him on the show several times at this point. Hopefully you have converted to be a stock exchange member, faithful listener of the pod. We appreciate Trevor for coming on again, as always. Trevor, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, guys. I got to say, like, sometimes, I'll go through and do, reoccurring podcasts with teams, and, there's not a lot to talk about. It's a very quiet, free agency or just overall offseason. Not the case with the Chargers. Y'all have had new GM, new head coach, big free agent moves. The team's looking different. You're going to do, what could they do in the draft? All these possibilities. And so it's great to be with you, because of the conversations that we're going to have here on this show, I have naturally in my own personal life as well when I'm just talking to all my friends. So I'm excited for this one.
Yeah, if this were last year, it would have been a much more boring conversations. The Chargers were strapped with cash, same coaching staff, everything. And they had the 21st pick instead of the 5th pick. So a lot more possibilities this year. So
yes,
we'll dive right in. You mentioned the big free agency move. We'll talk about the draft ramifications here in a minute, just like from a reactionary, level here. I mean, you cover the sport, for a living, right? That as fans of the team, we were shocked, gutted by the news of the Keenan Allen trade.
Yeah.
For you, was that something you expected to happen? And what was just kind of your surface level reaction when you saw that news late on Thursday night last week?
Look, we knew that the Chargers were going to have to make some moves, right? We saw the guys at the top of the list who were big cap casualties or potential cap casualties for this year. All the cap space that was wrapped up into Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. And I think if you asked most people, they tell you, okay, rank most likely to least likely of those 4 that would actually no longer be on the team. Pretty sure Keenan Allen would be like 90% of the time number 4 on that list. And that's where it was for me. I was just very, very shocked that a franchise legend obviously is out the door. This is somebody who has been a staple identity for the Chargers, throughout so many different parts of their franchise over the last 10 years. He's somebody who has been a staple, like within, not just for Chargers fans, but like I said, he's always been known with that team. If you play fantasy football, you obviously are very fond of Keenan Allen and everything that he has been for you as a heavy volume guy throughout the years while he was in the Chargers organization. And so I was just super shocked, man. I look, it's a business at the end of the day, and there just are not many instances where you get that true storybook, wire to wire, guy stays with the same team throughout his whole career. Normally there's some sort of blip in that. They'll maybe go to a team late in their career, but they'll come back, they'll retire on the team, all that kinds of stuff. But man, I was still, with all that to say, I was so shocked to see Keenan Allen no longer as a member of the Chargers. It's going to take some getting used to seeing him in a different jersey for sure.
Yeah, I was in high school when he joined the team, and I'm going on 29 now. So it's been a minute since he's been on the team. We had done a live stream right before. We got off 5 minutes later. The news broke. We jumped back on, and we were just in agony over the move. I don't think we said anything constructive or useful. We were just going through certain emotions. Go check it out if you want. have fun. It's just us in agony. If you want to see me miserable for an hour, go watch it. So now the $1 million question, and they also, of course, released Mike Williams. What do the Chargers do at 5? Maybe more so, do they need to take
all
a
of
wide
a sudden,
receiver at 5?
Things at number 5, shoot, over the last, I'd say, week and a half have gotten way more interesting, right? Because it's a very good wide receiver class, especially at the very top. I've been on here on this show and we've talked about Marvin Harrison Jr. We've talked about Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, how I think you could plop them in basically most teams in the NFL. And if they're not the wide receiver 1, they're a high-end wide receiver 2. And so that's how talented all of these guys are. I think any of them, if you put them on the Chargers depth chart, they probably lead the team in targets next year. So with those guys in range of being picked, what do you do at number 5? Because the reason why I say it's been an interesting week is because you guys know Minnesota trades for the number 23 overall pick. They're eyeing a trade up for a quarterback. So you go, okay, well, what are the pinpoints of where we think they could trade up to? Well, it's basically Arizona at 4, because I don't think New England's going to get out of 2. And I don't think that I don't think that Washington's going to get out of 2. I don't think New England's going to get out of 3. So it's either the Arizona Cardinals at 4 or it's the Los Angeles Chargers at 5. That I think Minnesota is really going to be pushing to move up with. So that just becomes very, very interesting because it's wide receiver we're talking about, right? If they stay, they could take offensive line, but we think that it's going to be a wide receiver on the heels of the news of you don't have Mike Williams, you don't have Keenan Allen. Now it's just Quentin Johnson, and he was disappointing last year. Can you really go into next year? Sure, I think they think he's going to get better, but can you go into next year really saying this guy's going to be our wide receiver 1? Even for somebody who I liked a lot coming out of TCU, that's a heavy ask. And so that all of a sudden becomes an incredible debate. And I think that it even gets very interesting if Minnesota doesn't trade up with them. Let's say Minnesota trades up to 4, right? So now you've got 4 quarterbacks that we think are going to go off the board. 1, 2, 3, 4. Guess who's going to be sitting there on the board at 5? Now you're talking about, okay, do we want to trade down or do we want Marvin freaking Harrison Jr., which we didn't think that was going to be a possibility, right? Oh, he could have gone 3. He could have gone 4. Like, there was no chance he was going to get to 5. And now a reality exists where he could be the player who is on the board for them. And they might have to choose between a massive trade down, if that's kind of what they're still eyeing, if they want to get more picks. But it's different when you're also talking about passing up on a player like that. So it's fascinating ripple effect that we are seeing with the Chargers getting rid of Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, now having just such a massive need at wide receiver, and that being the position that is very rich at the spot that they happen to hold right now amidst a lot of trade rumors.
Yeah, you mentioned just kind of like what we thought would happen, and like it in my head, I'm looking at pick number 5 2 weeks ago and saying, okay, if quarterbacks go 1 through 3, Marvin Harrison 4, great, you can trade down for a quarterback. On the outside chance the quarterbacks go 1 through 4, you could still trade down and have a team move up for a wide receiver because you have Keenan Allen. Well, now you don't have Keenan Allen, and it just like changes your mindset of how you approach this. And of course, we're fans, your draft media. The team is still going to, I think, approach this in the same way. I think they're going to want to try to get out. Mm-hmm. But Daniel Jeremiah had them trading out of 5 today in his mock draft. The Jets came up for Marvin Harrison Jr., who just signed Mike Williams. I don't know if that would change that much for the Jets, but what realistically would be the haul if Marvin Harrison Jr. is there at 5 and the Chargers say, hey, league, come get this generational wide receiver prospect? What do you think the Chargers could get in a trade down for a team coming up for Marvin Harrison Jr.?
Yeah, I wonder, when I say personal, I don't really mean like personal in a negative way. I think that when people hear that, they automatically think like, oh, it's personal. That means it's negative. But I wonder how personal this is for Jim Harbaugh specifically, as the person who had to go up against Marvin Harrison Jr. twice. And Marvin Harrison Jr. went for over 100 yards and a touchdown in both of the appearances that Ohio State played against Michigan, right? Michigan wins both of those games, sure. But like, that dude's cooking us on the outside. And for one of those
Michigan
games,
has a great corner too.
Will Johnson is going to be a first-round pick next year. So like, he's producing against Will Johnson, and Jim Harbaugh knows how talented he is. So it's like, I wonder if that personal touch of it makes it even harder to pass up on him if he is right there. The answer to your question, though, it all kind of depends where they're going. And I know that's kind of a cop-out, but who would be wanting to trade up for Harrison, right? You could move maybe one spot down with the Giants, who would love to get themselves Marvin Harrison Jr. And you could maybe sell it to them as like, hey, our phones are open. We're listening to you guys, but we're talking to other teams as well that might want to move up from him. If you really want to, you can move down one spot. So for that, I mean, you're not going to get too much in return for a move down from 5 to 6, especially when a quarterback is not involved. But, I think Chicago at 9 all of a sudden becomes a realistic target, right? Because I don't think the Chargers want to move down too far. And the Bears, they have Caleb Williams, and I get it. They don't have a lot of draft picks this year, but they could sell some future draft picks to say to themselves, look, we spent in free agency last year. We spent in free agency this year. We're getting Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick. Go get Marvin Harrison Jr. too. Like, do what it takes, and just that offense, man. It's Keenan Allen. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. It's DJ Moore. It's Cole Kmet. It's Gerald Everett. It's DeAndre Swift. Like, it's Roshan Johnson. It's Khalil Herbert. Like, all of a sudden, what more could you genuinely want? Yeah, sure. Like the offensive line. Yeah, maybe you could have a couple upgrades here. But at that point, Ryan Poles gets to say, my cards are on the table. I did everything that I could do as a general manager. So either Eberflus figures it out, or we go into next year and I can point to the evidence of how all in I was for this team, and we go get a head coach that could really take us over the top. To me, I think Chicago at number 9 becomes a major player in a trade up to number 5 if we're not talking about a quarterback being the player that they're trading down for. You could talk about how, maybe Denver, now that they move on from Jerry Jeudy, would they want to do that? I guess so. New Orleans maybe because they move on from Mike Thomas, but they've still got Shaheed. They've still got Chris Olave. And you can't really get too much further down, right? I mean, maybe you're at a point where the Chargers wanted to trade with Jacksonville, I guess, at 17, who all of a sudden needs a wide receiver 1. But do you really want to go from 5 to 17? I mean, the price to do that to make it worth the Chargers' while would be multiple first-round picks, I think, to get to that point. So these are just as you asked that question, and I haven't really had the time to think about it, that's kind of what comes to my head immediately of certain points and teams that might be interested to move up for Marvin Harrison Jr. if they would want to do that.
Yeah, great calls there, because obviously the Chargers and the Bears will make trades together. So that's a possibility for sure. And historically they've done that. Absolutely. And then with the Jaguars, not exactly a Joe Ortiz call, but the Ravens have traded with the Jaguars 5 separate times since 2011 for picks, for players, etc. So that is possible. The next question, and the guy that's maybe the most involved in this spot for the Chargers at 5, is JJ McCarthy. And I want to ask this question a bit differently. Why is JJ McCarthy not a Malik Willis situation in terms of draft hype? Because this was a guy Malik Willis was 14th on the consensus board and went several picks later in the 3rd round. Why is this not that situation?
I think that was the 2022 class, right? I think the 2022 class was tough. There wasn't really a good quarterback that I think a team could really plant their flag on, but as you guys know, and a lot of football fans out there know, teams just take a swing at these quarterbacks because they have to, right? Just because a draft class doesn't have good quarterbacks doesn't mean there aren't teams out there who don't have quarterback needs, right? Every single year there are teams that have quarterback needs. And so draft media was obviously very wrong on these quarterbacks because we can evaluate them from a tape standpoint and maybe a potential standpoint. And I think if you asked people, like with Willis, sure, I mean, there's things that are great that he brought to the table with it, but there were serious inconsistencies about his game, even when he was at Liberty, right? So in a perfect world, you probably didn't want to give him anything better than a 2nd round grade, even for as much as you might have liked him. But we all, as draft evaluators and maybe consensus board makers, just think to ourselves, I mean, it's the NFL. They're going to draft one of these guys high. And so I think that class, there was a lot of fool's gold. And for a lot of people, like when I remember that class, it kind of felt, were you a Desmond Ridder guy or were you a Kenny Pickett guy, right? Did you trust the tape of which guy more? Because it was kind of, one of those was probably your QB1, and then Willis was probably QB2 no matter what. So I think Willis gets elevated on those consensus board rankings because he was just that consensus, like he was always up there. He was always in that number 2 spot. So no matter if you kind of believe in Desmond Ridder and, the height, a little bit better arm, or you believe in Kenny Pickett and the incredible final year that he had at Pittsburgh and just that run that he had there in that final season, like whichever one you were on that brought him to QB1, and I guess Sam Howell too, right? There's plenty of people who believed in Sam Howell to be a potential QB1. It just felt like Malik Willis was always that, okay, it's this guy, and then I'll probably put Malik. And I think that's the reason why he ended up being a little bit higher on those consensus boards, because there wasn't as much variance on him. People went, oh, mobile quarterback, big arm, the NFL is going to give him a chance, we're going to draft him in the first round. But I really feel as though the NFL just didn't like that class overall, and very clearly how they drafted him, how they drafted them, that has been the case. And I just don't think that there's that same sort of feeling for this class right now. I think the feeling for these guys is legit. The only one that we have now heard teams seem to be a little bit wishy-washy on is Drake May, which I think is absolutely silly. But there is a lot of love for J.J. McCarthy that I genuinely believe is real. I think the same thing for Jaden Daniels. Maybe not enough for Jaden to go 2. We'll see how that plays out on draft night. But I don't think McCarthy is in that similar situation like with Will Levis as well, with somebody who just 48 hours up until draft day last year, I remember Willis in the betting market, his odds to go number 2 overall spiked, skyrocketed. And we went, whoa, okay, somebody knows something about something. And we all kind of scrambled on our final mock drafts, and we're all like, okay, well, the betting markets, Vegas ain't in the business of losing money, so they're doing something. They got to be doing something on purpose. So we all put Will Levis kind of in the top 10. We're like, okay, he's going top 10. He doesn't even go till the second round. So it's a great question, because there always seems to be this quarterback that seems to be a little bit of fool's gold in their hype, right? You go back to 2021 as well. I remember when Mac Jones was supposed to go number 3 overall. Now he doesn't slide too far. He was at 15. But again, he was the pawn, it felt like. Willis, a couple years ago, was the pawn. That sounds insulting, but you guys know what I'm saying. The same thing with Will Levis, Levis last year. And so I just don't think McCarthy's the pawn. I really don't. I think that the love for him is legit.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because obviously we're fans of a team coached by Jim Harbaugh, and like the second day he was hired, he was like, JJ McCarthy should be the first quarterback taken, and we were like, wait, what? No. And now, like,
oh, you don't say, Jim.
Yeah. But specifically from a GM standpoint, I think everybody kind of knows that the Cardinals GM Monty Austinforth and the Chargers GM Joe Ortiz at this point are open for business. It sounds like. What are the chances really that the Cardinals would pass on Marvin Harrison Jr. for a trade package, now that the Vikings have 11 and 23? Because you look at the Cardinals roster, they just traded away Rondale Moore.
Right.
Hollywood Brown is a Kansas City Chief right now. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, it's been like blinking neon sign, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. What would you say the chances realistically are that the Cardinals do end up passing on him in favor of a trade down with the Minnesota Vikings?
I wish I had a better answer in terms of like, hey, this is the percentage that I'm sure that I think that it would happen. But it's tough because you look at a general manager who doesn't have much of a track, doesn't have much of a background, I should say, a history to how he's going to operate things. The only thing that we really have to go off of is last year. And last year, he wasn't afraid to wheel and deal, right? He went from 3 to 12 to 6, got an extra first round pick out of it, and was able to pick the guy at number 6 that he would have picked at number 3. So that is why I love the Cardinals draft amongst the other guys that they drafted. I love Michael Wilson. I love Garrett Williams. So I think that they drafted very, very well. That, to me, his willingness to do that makes me think that they might not be too scared to, let's say they get 11 and 23. Because remember, they already have 27 as well. Yep. So let's say they get 11, they get 23, and then they have 27. But they've also got, I can pull it up here.
Do they have like 7 picks in the top 60 or something crazy like that?
They have right now they have 4. They have 27, they have 35, they have 66, and they have 71. Oh, and they have 90. That's all in the top 100 picks. That's crazy. So what the Cardinals could do, and the reason I feel they might actually have the guts to trade out of number 4 and pass on Marvin Harrison Jr. is because if they go, all right, we'll go from 4 to 11. You go from 4 to 11, and then all of a sudden, if you're sitting there at 11, all right, JJ McCarthy goes to 4 to the Minnesota Vikings. the Chargers, let's say, take Marvin Harrison Jr. Let's say the New York Giants take Malik Neighbors at 6. Now, all of a sudden, Arizona's calling the Titans, and they go, okay, you are a rebuilding franchise. We'll give you picks later this year in day 2, and we'll give you picks in day 2 next year. Let us go from 11 to 7, and we'll get Rome Odunze. So now, all of a sudden, now they're sitting at 7. They have Rome Odunze, and then they also pick 23 and 27 and 35. So that is why it's a great question. Would the Cardinals genuinely pass on that type of a wide receiver? And the answer to it, I think, lies in what they think of the other 2 wide receivers. Because Austin Ford is not the kind of guy who I think is just going to make a trade and then go, whew, all right, made a trade, we're good to go. If he moves back from 4 to 11 and 23, he's going to be on the phone immediately with all of those other teams saying, okay, I got 11 now. Actually, he probably has these conversations before the draft even starts because, you only got 15 minutes on the clock. So he's probably already laid the baseline, and he probably only makes the move from 4 to 11 if he feels like maybe he can have the confidence to get back up if they want one of these receivers. So that's, again, where my mind goes when you ask the question, would the Cardinals pass on a guy like this? I think they have the flexibility to be able to pass on a guy like that because I think they can get back up and still be really happy with it.
Yeah, Cardinals, I think this is a really smart move for you. I'm happy to clip this out for you and send it to you along with a fruit basket and a bouquet of roses or whatever. Okay, let's say the Chargers, because Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, they're going to run the football. Let's say they go trenches and then a corner in the second round because they need one. Who is that receiver? Who are some of the receivers round 3, day 3, etc.? They really fit what the Chargers want to do, which is to get faster and work the play action game.
There's a lot of receivers that I think could be really nice picks somewhere like 3rd, 4th round. I think Javon Baker from UCF is somebody who I really like. Now, he's like sort of similar to Josh Palmer a little bit, so it's kind of like funny, like pairing him with the Chargers, but I think Baker's a really talented player who in a different draft class could be a top 8 wide receiver. I do. I think that he is super talented, and he's just going to get pushed way outside of wide receiver 10 and the top 10 of receivers taken just because it is so talented. But I think that he is really good. Jamari Thrash is somebody else who I like from Louisville, who's got a knack for winning deep. He's somebody who I think could really help in that, like, okay, play action. You keep the defense honest. You've got to be able to pay attention at all times. Brendan Rice from USC as well. He had a lot more strength and power to his game that I was able to see firsthand when he was at the Senior Bowl. Some people looked at it and they're like, oh, he can't separate. And okay, he struggled to separate a little bit, but let's not take it away from him. He was also making some of the best contested catches like all week. And so now you've just got this dude who very, very high IQ of how to win at the position. Maybe not quite the smooth athlete that his dad was, but a strong player, knows how to make those contested catches. You're going to be able to get him on the field in blocking down situations for, like you said, like that play action role, things like that. So those are a handful of guys that I'm trying to think, like Johnny Wilson from Florida State maybe is somebody else as well. Just a giant 6'7", 240-pound wide receiver who length and measurables alone makes you a good blocker and somebody who could actually help out a lot in the play action game. But he's also somebody who I think wins very, very well off the line of scrimmage with a lot of releases in a way that you would not think for a player of his size. So I wonder if just that unique ability is something that they would gravitate towards as well. But I think those are a handful of receivers that when I think like round 3, that's what I think could be realistic targets for him.
There you go. One of the last things I wanted to ask you about today, Trevor, the Chargers signed Bradley Bozeman to be their presumable center for the short term. We'll see what happens in the long term here, but center is obviously a position of need. Corey Linsley likely retiring, has not been officially announced, but obviously there was like the restructure and all that went down. So center is going to be a spot that a lot of people point to the Chargers on day 2. I guess this is maybe a 2-parter here because there's a lot of hype around the top of the center class. I know in your guys' mock draft, you did have Zach Frazier going pretty high along with Graham Barton and Jackson Powers Johnson. So if the Chargers were to look, at one of those guys, is that something they would have to trade up for at this point? And then if they wanted to wait, who are maybe kind of your round 3, round 4 guys of choice there?
Yeah, I mean, them picking at 37 right now, I mean, that's Zach Frazier range. I mean, I wouldn't sit here and say like, oh, it's unrealistic. You get Zach Frazier. Zach Frazier's a really good player, but I I don't know, center's normally not rated that high anyways. I think in mock drafts, we're seeing Jackson Powers Johnson mocked in the top 20. I wonder if that cools a little bit. Like he was great at the Senior Bowl. I just think a lot of people love him. I wonder if that cools a little bit and we start to see him more towards like, all right, well, maybe it's more like a mid-20s kind of a pick with Jackson Powers Johnson. Like I think about his connection to either the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Dallas Cowboys or something like mid-20s-ish. And does that kind of push Frazier down a little bit further into that early to mid-30s range? I think it's realistic that you could possibly get him there. But, if you talk about third, fourth round kind of players, Cedric Van Pran from Georgia is somebody who I like because he was entrusted to be the middle of that offensive line during some of Georgia's title runs. And when I think he was a redshirt freshman his first year as a starter. Then he was redshirt sophomore, redshirt junior. He was able to start all 3 years for him. Not exactly the most fleet of foot type of a player, but again, for a Jim Harbaugh type of scheme, I mean, bully people up front, man. I mean, just like beat people up front, be physical. I think he's going to love Van Pran. I really do. Obviously, the Michigan center as well. Drake Nugent is in this class. I think he could be an option for them. Bo Limmer from Arkansas. He's a guy who's played guard. He's played center. I think his best position is going to be center at the NFL level. But then you can go a little bit further down. There's a couple of names who have had good off seasons. Maybe you're talking about early day 3 range. Hunter Norzad from Penn State, I thought had a really great Shrine Bowl when I was able to see him there. Tanner Bortolini played a lot better at the Senior Bowl than I thought. I mean, I watched him on tape and I was like, man, I think this guy's too light. I don't really feel like he deals with power very well. It's a different story in Mobile. He had a really nice combine week as well. So he's somebody who I think could be a nice center option somewhere on day 3. And then a lot of people like Dylan McMahon from NC State as well, who again, like played a lot better at the Senior Bowl than I thought that he was going to. So it's a decent center class. It really is. I think there's a lot of different options, whether you want to go for a guy like Powers Johnson or Frazier with a top 40 pick, or you could wait a little bit. And I think that you could still find a potential starter at center when you get into round 3 and round 4.
Flipping to the other side now, I've been talking to Cody Alexander about the Chargers scheme and Jesse Minter and what they'll need on defense. They obviously kept the edge rushers. So they'll have Thule, they'll have Joey Bosa, they'll have Khalil Mack, but they need a defensive tackle. They need a space eater. Who are those guys outside of Tavondre Sweat that are like 300 plus pounds, total space eaters?
Yeah, other than Tavondre Sweat, who's the next Tavondre Sweat? No. But I think that's a good question because and it's a great question to have if you're the Chargers, because I think they're not alone in that they love one of those space eater type of players. Problem is, not a lot of space eaters in this class, right? Like I'm looking at just the big board right now. You got Byron Murphy, you got Jerzon Newton, who I think are the first round interior defensive linemen, right? Those guys are very versatile. They can play anything from a shade nose to a 4-eye technique. You're comfortable with them winning in a lot of ways. I mean, there's even reps for Jerzon Newton where he's playing 5 technique defensive end, and that's just the kind of versatility that he has. So I think all those guys can play any spot. But then you get to, okay, Braden Fisk, really nice one-gap penetrating player, but short arms, not somebody that you're going to want to 2-gap in an odd front. Ruka Rororo, you like his versatility, but again, does he have that size and power? The same exact thing goes to Brandon Dorlus as well. Dorlus is a nice option for them, but like when I think of Dorlus, I like his versatility, but I don't like him if you're just saying, hey, plug this gap. Like that's what we want you to do. Like, yeah. I think he brings you a little bit more than that. He's not as big of a player as you would want. I think he's, around 285, something like that. And so I think that that's not a weight that you would want there. Chris Jenkins Jr. from Michigan. I don't mean to bring up another Michigan player, but like Harbaugh saw what he was kind of holding the line of scrimmage. And I think he actually gives you that power profile to be somebody who could eat up some blocks. But then it's like, Michael Hall Jr. from Ohio State, more of a 3-tech, a pass rusher. Dwayne Carter from Duke, same thing. Leonard Taylor III from Miami, same thing. McKinley Jackson. He's got the size and he's played a little bit of nose, but he was more of that, hey, we're going to line you up at nose and you're just going to beat the center with quickness. Not necessarily we're going to line you up in nose, do the whole Tavondre Sweat, Jordan Davis thing where you forklift the guy and you're peeking in the backfield and you throw him to the side. Like that's just not his role in that. You get a little bit further down, maybe like a Tyler Davis from Clemson could fit that mold. Justin Rogers from Auburn, Keith Randolph from Illinois, but now we're talking about day 3 guys. So it's just this is ultimately why I tend to put Devondre Sweat a little bit higher in mock drafts than I feel like he should be drafted. I tend to put him like early, mid-second round, just because he not only is he a uniquely sized individual, he's pretty unique in this class. There's just a lot of pass rush defensive tackles. There's not a lot of those guys who are going to take on 2 blocks on the line of scrimmage. So if you want one, you might have to pay a premium and draft them a little bit earlier than maybe you'd want. So it is a great question. Unfortunately, I just don't think there's a lot of answers in this class before you get to somewhere on day 3. And then at that point, you're kind of taking a flyer on him anyways.
All right. There we go. Some great information. Tyler, did you have any last questions here? I should ask that first, I guess.
Oh, that was it. Got to finish on the defensive tackle. 300+ pounder
Love
question.
Love to see it. Trevor, this has been great, man. Listeners here, if you are not following Trevor, listening to his podcast, I strongly encourage you to do that. Of course, it is mock draft season. PFF just introduced a new feature on the simulator, which is I love. They get to control the consensus board. If you want more of the general consensus board instead of just PFFs, you can use that. It's a great simulator, in my opinion, best simulator out there. So, Trevor, thanks so much for joining us, man. We'll be in touch soon.
All right, appreciate it, guys. Anytime.
All right, guys, we'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back here. All right, Tyler, any final thoughts there about our interview? It is a great discussion today. Lots of trade talk, obviously, but any final thoughts there?
Please, Cardinals, pass on Marvin Harrison Jr. That's all I'm saying.
And Chargers, don't do that. Take Marvin Harrison Jr. That's the dream right now.
There you go. Easy.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's going to be very interesting. We're coming up on a little over a month away from the draft, which is crazy to me. Wrapping up free agency and things like that. So going to be a ton of fun. We'll have you guys covered a lot more draft conversations here on this channel as well as our own channel over the next few weeks. That being said, we wanted to essentially put a bow on the Keenan Allen conversation. And I know that there are some people who have already moved on and more power to you. But in our own way, we wanted to express our gratitude for Keenan Allen and the efforts that he has given the Chargers over the last decade. It's been a long time and been some great memories. So we're going to talk about some more of the positive memories, the lasting legacy of Keenan Allen in the Chargers uniforms. I couldn't say powder blues because they were primarily navy for a little bit there, but Keenan Allen obviously leaving a lasting legacy with the Chargers here. Can't thank him enough for the lasting memories. And I know, Tyler, you've talked a bit about what he means to your fandom. And I don't know if I've necessarily shared my own story with Keenan Allen because I was on an LDS church mission in Mexico during his rookie season and his sophomore season. And so I didn't get to watch those seasons. I didn't get to watch the great Denver game where he hurdles over and scores the touchdown. And I would just get these emails from my dad. Hey, you got to see this Keenan Allen guy when you come back from your mission. And so I come home and the Chargers were not very good. There was all the moving stuff. And so I just latched on to Keenan and like what he meant to the team alongside with Philip Rivers, and Antonio Gates was still at the team on the time. And so, it just is, it's just a guy that you kind of gravitate towards. He's always been that player. And he kept me, not that I was ever going to leave, obviously. Once a fan, always a fan. But he just kind of kept me coming back, wanting for more for the Chargers. And that was, unfortunately, the couple of seasons where he gets injured and things like that. So it's just, Keenan is the guy that kept me glued to the Chargers alongside Philip Rivers. And I'll always be grateful for what he has meant to the team and the effort, the moments, the positivity, the vibes, everything that he brought to the squad is just, he's just a player that I'll always remember. I'll tell my kids, my grandkids, in the future one day about how awesome it was to watch the prime of Keenan Allen and what he meant to the Chargers.
Yeah, Keenan Allen was really the soul of the Chargers. And I think other players have been the heart or the engine that gets the team going. But it really felt like Slayer was the soul there. It was his personality. It was his musicality. It was his competitiveness. His connection with his teammates, his playfulness, Bolt fam, that's rad, all that sort of stuff. So good. And, he'll always be immortalized for the route running, right? And that's what makes him special. But what made him great was everything else that included like blocking in the run game. I mean, Tyree Wilson is 6'6", 270, and Keenan Allen sent him back to Texas Tech. Go watch the Bengals game. I think it was 4th and 1. There's a play where Keenan Allen lines up behind the center or in the hip pocket of the center because he's going to block the linebacker at the next level like a fullback to make sure they convert. He's even the guy, I think this past season where the Chargers practice was over, but they needed a corner out there. So he's like, okay, I'll go get out there after running my own routes with Herbert, and I'll go run corner against Mike Williams and against Josh Palmer and make everybody better. Like, yes, he'll always be remembered for the route running. That's what he's known for. That's his thing. But I just appreciate so much, and what makes him special is truly everything else about him. The soul that he was, what he meant for the Chargers. Tough to see him go for sure.
Yeah, I think back to my first time coming down to training camp when the Chargers moved to LA back in 2017. And I was just in awe of like seeing that guy in person and running the routes and just working on his craft. And I think that particular day that I was there, he stayed after for like a half hour, just working on a new concept with Philip Rivers and everything like that. And it's just, that kind of stuff is infectious. And we've seen that, bleed into how Joshua Palmer has approached his game in particular. And I look at his examples towards all of those other guys, and he's talked about it. Like that's how it was when he came into the league with Stevie Johnson and Eddie Royal and the examples that they left to him. And he felt that he needed to be that guy. It would have been easy for him to not take Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, and Quentin Johnston under his wing to say, hey, like I'm the alpha here. Like you better just fall in line. But he was always willing to give his extra time and running on routes, and like all the mic'd up clips of like Joshua Palmer, Quentin, even like a Jeremy Davis. I remember like going up to Keenan, like asking him about routes and things like that back in the day. So it's just, it's everything. Of course, the production certainly does not do harm there, but it's everything that Keenan was as a player. So I don't know if he's ever going to watch this, probably not, but Keenan, man, sincerely, thank you for everything that you gave to the franchise. We will always remember you. That being said, Tyler, if you had to pick one moment, one game that kind of, epitomizes the Keenan Allen experience, which would you kind of point to?
Oh boy, you should give me 45 minutes to talk about this. I think I'll end up giving several. So I'll start with
thesis.
Yeah, no kidding. No, I've already done that. I will start with one that comes to mind, which isn't even a catch, or wasn't a catch that counted, I should say. His rookie season, they travel to Washington, and he runs a route, and he gets called for offensive pass interference. He didn't touch the defender, but the defensive back went so far the other direction that the ref thought that he must have committed offensive pass interference. That's just how good Keenan was as a route runner, that he would get called for offensive pass interference without ever touching the defensive back.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. Seen the clip 100 times. It never gets old. I think recency bias, the 10,000 yard catch was amazing. One of the best catches, we can ever say that we've seen. And Keenan was never really like a big circus catch guy, but that one definitely stands out. Again, just the moment, probably the coolest way to reach 10,000 yards of any player in NFL history. But I think like still to this day, one of my favorite Keenan Allen games was the Thanksgiving game against the Dallas Cowboys. Again, that was his first season, like coming back from the ACL and the kidney and everything like that. And there were still a lot of doubters about Keenan, and his ability to be an elite receiver. And that was kind of his, not launching point, because he was already that for us, right? But like that was him reminding people like, hey, like I'm about this life. And just the way that he dominated that game, I'll never forget. And I think also because I was at a Thanksgiving holiday celebration with other Cowboys fans. So some of my family members are Cowboys fans, the most popular team in Utah growing up. So watching that game, watching Keenan just torch the Cowboys with Cowboys fans on Thanksgiving, that's always going to be something that I will remember and appreciate for Keenan Allen.
Yeah, love that one. Love the hurdle, as you said, in Mile High. That was great. Love the game with Philip Rivers against the Packers, where it feels like he had 20 catches in the first half. The great catch against the Ravens that he actually ended up suffering the kidney injury because of it, but the catch was awesome. So many plays. I think in terms of games, I guess I could also talk about like his literally his best game ever, which was recently against the Minnesota Vikings. This past season was awesome for Keenan Allen. He thinks it was his best season. And that's one of those games where you go, yeah, that probably was your best season, because he had 18 catches, 215 yards, and a 49-yard passing touchdown to Mike Williams. I mean, just set record after record and threw almost a 50-yard bomb on top of it. It was an awesome game, and they needed him. The Chargers absolutely needed to win that game. They had not won the previous 2 games, and they were going to blitz like crazy. So a lot of cover zero, a lot of, sending their corners on an island, and Keenan Allen went okay and caught 18 passes and just absolutely torched the Vikings that day.
Yeah, the last one I think for me is the that catch moment from the Dolphins game a couple of seasons ago, where everybody knew that Justin Herbert was going to throw the ball to Keenan Allen, and it did not matter. He just pinned it right on him. Keenan ran a great route, got the first down, went down and won the game. That was a cool moment. I don't think people really will, like, maybe Chargers fans will, but outsiders, I don't think they'll really appreciate how difficult it must be for a guy like Keenan to go from Phillip Rivers, who you have this like amazing connection with, right? Like mentally, you're just on that mind meld, and then do that again. Like we've never really seen that. Like, of course, there's like Devontae and Aaron Rodgers and things like that, but usually when that guy goes to another quarterback, it just kind of takes a minute, and it just kind of never really comes together at the same level. But right in Justin Herbert's first start, Keenan Allen runs a deep over route. Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger, is trailing right underneath, and Justin Herbert just trusted him. He threw it right in the perfect spot, and that was just kind of the beginning of beautiful bromance over the last 4 seasons. So it's something that will go underappreciated. Just the ability to mind meld with Rivers and then mind meld with Herbert into the next era of Chargers football. It was truly a treat to watch.
How about just being consistent with different offensive coordinators and play callers since 2013? We were talking Mike McCoy and Frank Reich and Ken Wisenhunt, and you have Anthony Lynn as your next coach, Ken Wisenhunt again, Shane Steichen, Joe Lombardi, Kellen Moore. And it's like, sure, you want 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's an automatic guarantee, especially that 6 touchdown part. That was a fun streak for a bit there where he just could not get over 6 touchdowns.
Yeah, no doubt. So it is going to be a little weird, obviously, watching him in a different uniform. New Chargers era for sure. Excited to see how that comes to fruition, the vision that the Chargers have for him. But we wanted to do right by Keenan and be able to talk about some of his best moments because he deserves it. And I know that like there's a lot of talk recently about his legacy and like what he means to the franchise. And all due respect to guys who are in the Hall of Fame, who played back in the day, Lance Allworth and Charlie Joyner, those guys, of course, Vincent Jackson, Malcolm Floyd. To me, Keenan Allen has the most receptions of any Chargers wide receiver. He has the most yards of any Chargers wide receiver. He was the most consistently great at his job of any Chargers wide receiver. So for me, best receiver in franchise history. Probably not on the Mount Rushmore for Chargers legends because you have Junior Seau, LT, and obviously Antonio Gates, who are, arguably the best players ever at some of their positions. So it's a bit tough for Keenan to get on that Mount Rushmore, but I think unequivocally for me, best receiver in franchise history, top 10 player in franchise history. When all is said and done, number 13 should be retired by the team, in my opinion, going forward.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. I don't think he makes Mount Rushmore like you said, at least not yet. Obviously, this is not the end of a career. We have no idea how many more years he could play. Could be 1 more year, could be 3 more years, could be 5 more years. Who knows? But we'll see how long that goes for. I think I'll put and respect where like Allworth and Joyner and then Winslow, not necessarily, maybe O'Neal as well, considering how many sacks he has for the team.
Sure.
I'll put him in like the same conversation. How much further he goes in the rankings in Chargers history, it kind of depends on how he does the next few seasons. But yeah, he's definitely in that conversation as one of the best Chargers of all time.
Yeah, I think that 4th spot is probably one of the quarterbacks, depending on how you feel about Fouts versus Rivers. But that's probably the consensus top 5 is Seau, Gates, Tomlinson, and then the 2 quarterbacks. That's probably the top 5. But I think Keenan Allen has a legitimate argument to be in the top 10 at least.
I would agree. Great guy.
All right. Tyler, any final thoughts about Keenan or the draft or whatever before we hop off for the day?
I've done enough mock drafts, man. I'm going to go take a nap.
And then you're going to wake up and do a mock draft? Is that what you're going to say? Don't
tell them exactly what my problems are. I talk about this in confidence. I have an issue. Keep that to yourself. Keep that between us.
I gotcha. All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, make sure subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Make sure and watch all the great coverage that the Chargers have of free agency and things like that. Matt Money Smith and Chris Harry will be on this channel obviously later this week, so be sure and tune into them. Throw a like and subscribe over on our own channel at the Guilty as Charged podcast. And thanks to Tyler, thanks to Trevor, thanks to Greg Kim for producing, thanks to the Chargers for having us. And that's going to do it for us today. As always, hold on.